Pokemon Black and White introduced the largest and most controversial group of new Pokemon. 15 years later, these same Pokemon are now fan favorites, and Game Freak would be crazy not to give new forms and evolutions to Pokemon like Zebstrika, Beartic, Excadrill, and Golurk. Hey everyone, it's Dusty Go-Go. Welcome back to my headcanon. Every single year we get a new Pokemon game, and with that, new Pokemon designs. When we eventually go back to the Unova region, these are the Pokemon I want to see get attention. Let's start with Zebstrika. This is a Pokemon that I think most people have trained in their lifetime. It's a good Pokemon, but it's not a great Pokemon. I think there is incredible opportunity to not only make it bigger and stronger, but to also make Zebstrika more interesting. I would love to see Game Freak incorporate the anatomy and features of other animals into this design. This Zebstrika evolution takes a lot of inspiration from a rhinoceros. It's got blue thunderbolts all over its body. You can see it's much wider and stout in stature. It's got this electric blue horn protruding from its body. Its white fur has overgrown, but if you're not a fan of this, here's another design by my friend Arno. This is Okapstrike, the lightning rod Pokemon based on okapis and giraffes. This Pokemon's long neck makes it perfect to attract lightning during storms. This Pokemon is now electric and steel type, and I love how the subtle blue and yellow tones from the previous evolutions are a lot more saturated in this design. Here's an evolution for Heatmor. This is a fire and steel type evolution. There's a similar gimmick here to Tinkaton. Heatmor is a Pokemon that has a natural rivalry to the bug and steel type Durant. Well, it looks like after Heatmor has consumed an entire colony of this Pokemon, it uses the steel remains as armor and then undergoes an evolution. This might even be like a metal coat evolution. Another slept on Pokemon in Generation 5 in the Unova games is Beartic. I always loved using Beartic in these games, but if this Pokemon were to evolve into this Pokemon right here, Ice Bear, it could claim that ice and water type, which I think would make it a little bit more defensive. This design is really successful because it totally transforms the silhouette of Beartic, right? This isn't basically a mega Beartic, right? This is a completely new Pokemon. As Beartic continues to grow, it ends up navigating on all fours. Very similarly to Ursaluna, its tail gets bushier and the hump on its back continues to freeze over, now resembling an icy summit. And then as this thing swims throughout the water, it would honestly look a lot like an iceberg, and that's why it's called Iceberg. Here's a classic regional Beartic that I've seen all over the internet. This is by Goompy. They've created this regional Cubchoo that is ice and poison type. The poison basically emphasizing that this variant of Cubchoo, the runny icicle snot on its design, is actually a real illness, right? This Pokemon has a perpetual virus in its body. And as it evolves, Beartic becomes ill, starts losing weight, becoming very sickly, and its fur coat it wears like a blanket. Also, you can see all over, it's got this green snotty beard that it just launches out like icicles. I can see this Pokemon learning classic poison type moves like Poison Sting. You could even give it the Poison Touch ability. All right, this next Pokemon is a split evolution to a very controversial Pokemon. Typically, Vanillish evolves into Vanillux, and it's like an ice cream sundae. But actually, this evolution, La Vanilla by Mr. DJ Walnut, shows the melting ice cream cone stacked one on top of another, which also makes it look a lot like a snowman. I don't know about you, but when I interact with an ice cream cone, usually my ice cream is melting. This design also does a great job of demonstrating melting ice cream by making it fire and ice type, and it's also a little bit of a companion to the Zen mode form of Galarian Darmanitan. So in the last video, I created an evolution for Girder where it evolves with a metal coat and becomes a metal worker. This is a new split evolution to Girder where Girder evolves to become an architect, where Girder becomes the urban planner, the mastermind behind the building project. This is Builder, and what's beautiful about this is that it gains the psychic type. I think this is a really appealing design. I think most people would enjoy this Pokemon far more than Conkeldurr. All I ever hear from my buddies is that Girder is too veiny, and the colors chosen here also are a lot less fleshy. And then it has these yellow tones and even a yellow cap, which resembles the construction hat. And I also love that it's presumably surfing around on the blueprints of the project. It has psychic power, so it's able to float in midair and use telepathy to move the girders all around the place. I'm not a Gen 1er, but they're definitely Pokemon that still haven't grown on me after 15 years. Sock and Throw are some of those Pokemon, unfortunately. I'm fairly confident that if these Pokemon gained a baby form form, it would be much easier for me to see how these could live in a Pokemon world in a natural environment. This is Taekwondo, the trainee Pokemon. It's this little purple Muppet, right, that's training. It looks like a little kid, a little first grader doing Taekwondo. I love this so much because it is a direct parallel to how in Generation 2, Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee were brought together into the same evolutionary family with its baby Pokemon Tyrogue. So of course, this Pokemon Taekwondo can evolve into Sock, it can evolve into Throw, but it could also evolve into a new Pokemon, Sumo, the ringer Pokemon, obviously based on a sumo wrestler. These names are very on the nose, but I love this. Seeing all four of these Pokemon right here makes it feel like an actual evolutionary family, and for whatever reason is making me actually appreciate the gis that they wear. I mean, in canon, they're not gis. In canon, it's like their skin, but it's obviously based on a type of clothing. Imagine if these Pokemon evolved even further. This next Pokemon is so cool, but I do want to let you know that you can help support the channel and help fund the creation of original Fakemon designs just like this one by joining my Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. There's a ton of perks. If you like this video, your contributions go directly into the pockets of the artists that I work with, as well as my editors. Okay, so before Generation 9, Bisharp was probably in the top 5 Pokemon that I wanted to see get an additional evolution, and we got that. But I always thought Pawniard and Bisharp, being based on chess pieces, always made perfect sense for this evolutionary family to be branched out. We would receive new Pokemon to represent the other pieces of a chessboard. Pawniard is the pawn, Bisharp is the bishop. This is Rookazer to represent a rook, and Baonite to represent your knight piece. And while Bisharp is Dark Steel type, I think it's a great opportunity for Rookazer to be Steel and Fighting type, and Baonite could be Steel and Normal type. I think King Gambit more or less functions as a king in the game of chess. A king can move in any direction, but it's limited by a single tile, where the queen can move in any direction infinitely. The queen really is the best piece in the game. Here's an evolution for Bisharp Queeniar. This evolutionary line is definitely one of my favorites, but I think there's a lot of untapped potential. I could see all of the admins of Team Plasma utilizing different evolutionary lines of Pawniard that correspond with whatever their level is. Here's a regional form for Fairthorn. Fairthorn is normally grass and steel type, and is, to me, a really weird Pokemon. It's based on types of fauna or seed pods that'll stick on you. This form of Fairthorn is water and steel type and is based on underwater mines. I could see these things floating at the depths surrounding the abyssal ruins to protect the ancient treasures. Fairthorn has these vines that it uses to latch onto the ceiling, and the parallel here is that its tentacles are so heavy that it really just functions to weigh it down, and because of that, Fairthorn is perpetually upside down. And you know, not all Pokemon designs need to be edgy, but this is a ground and grass type Garbodor based on organic compost. I've done a lot of gardening in my life, and this is so great because if you have done any sort of gardening, you'll know that compost is literally just rotting food and is as disgusting as any sort of trash. This is a gross Pokemon, but it is actually, it's eco-friendly. You can see one of its metal arms is now replaced by a worm, which I don't know if it would actually be replaced by a worm in an actual Pokemon design, but it could definitely be a branch. And to prove to you how good of an idea this is, here's another compost inspired Trubbish and a new regional evolution, Composis. This might be a combination of Compost and Colossus. This Pokemon is full of nutritious soil microbes. Again, it's bio-friendly, it's eco-friendly, and it stinks. It's disgusting. But this Pokemon's stupid grin is so lovable. I would 100% train this Pokemon. I don't care what the Gen 1ers have to say. Trubbish is a cutie, and Composis would 100% be on my team. So Unova has a lot of water. This is a regional type Drillbur. It's just a water type, but when it evolves, it becomes water and psychic type. Rather than digging through the earth, it now dives to extreme depths. This Pokemon is now based on the star-nosed mole, which is a small semi-aquatic mole found in moist, low elevation areas. These things on its nose are essentially hands. At least that's what they look like. Drillbur and Excadive can't see underwater, but they can sense underwater with the psychic abilities from their nose and their hands. I think this is a successful type swap. Next, let's talk about Golett and Golurk. I think Golett is a really cool Pokemon. It's said to have been constructed from clay in the ancient past to protect an ancient and mysterious civilization of people and Pokemon, right? This is ancient Unova. But I'm really curious of how Golett could be fueled if it wasn't for its ghost typing, right? So here we have a regional evolution for Golett. It's steel and fire type, and the ghostly spirit that is typically in its chest is actually fueled by fire. Rather than being built of clay, its body is clad in steel, and then from within its chest burns the hottest fire that fuels its soul. Maybe you just want to keep Golurk a ghost type. We have this Golurk form that's steel and ghost type, and it resembles the classic knight in shining armor. People love that Golurk has all these design tricks up its sleeves, right? It can tuck in its feet and propel itself with a jet stream, and it can also turn its arms into these like cannons. So this Golurk is equipped with a sword and a shield, and its sword can be propelled in and out of its body, kind of like Proto Man, kind of like a lightsaber. This puts a really nice mechanical spin on the whole design, and the artist Diggerfish has also kind of depicted it as kind of an iron giant. It is said to be an enchanted suit of armor that served royalty of ages past. This Pokemon is fiercely loyal to its trainer and has a protective spirit. So when I first ventured out in the land of Hisui and Pokemon Legends Arceus, I was thrilled to find a new white Basculin and its evolution Basculegion. This was such a cool Pokemon in addition to the Basculegion line, but I always felt like the base form Basculin, both forms, red and blue, both needed a little bit of love. Here's a new Basculin evolution, one for each form in the Unova region. Both Pokemon get an additional dark typing, even though these are based on Bass. I've always seen Basculin as a Piranha, and the visual differences that make these Pokemon so different in the first place are exaggerated upon evolution. I think both forms of Basculin are in some dire need for an upgrade. All right, now let's talk about one of my favorite Pokemon from Generation 5, Yamask and Cofagrigus. Yamask is this adorable little ghost, and the golden mask that it holds is supposed to be the face from its time as a human when it used to be alive. Since Black and White, we have seen the introduction of a Galarian Yamask, and it really gets me thinking, what other forms could Yamask take on? I know I'm not alone. I think if we were to get more Yamask in the future or more Yamask evolutions, is to really hone in and create new Pokemon that target people's fears. Here we got a Ghost in Psychic Yamask. It's a cute little Yamask with a purple eye because of the Psychic type, and it's holding a pillow. And as it evolves into Slumberigus, it becomes the monster under your bed. This is a classic childhood fear. The only solution to this fear is to make sure all of your arms and legs are tucked under the bed sheath. And while Cofagrigus is the eternal resting spot, Slumberigus targets daily slumbering spots. And even if this thing couldn't get me on the bed, I could imagine it could very easily pick up the bed and start walking around like a four-legged spider. Next, we've got a Yamask that is Ghost in Fairy type. Yamask is holding a balloon, but when it evolves into Jokerigus, it resembles a clown. There's definitely inspiration here from the It clown. And again, it's a very popular human fear, right? Clowns, their association to horror film and the uncanny valley. This one's real creepy. We also have a Ghost in Steel type Yamask holding a mirror, looking into itself. This actually might be the most frightening Yamask evolution of all. This is Mirrorigus, and there's nothing scarier than looking at your own reflection, facing your demons, facing your insecurities, and facing yourself. I love the little details here that Mr. DJ Walnut has given us. We can see the front of the mirror when it's all put together. The glass fragments are in place, and of course, when the Pokemon comes alive, you can see that iconic Cofagrigus eye, and the lower shards pop out, revealing an evil grin with sharp teeth. And Mirrorigus is also able to utilize the shards of glass as claws. The legendary dragon Pokemon of Unova, Reshiram and Zekrom, are legendary for a region. There's great legends depicting their lore and history and the impact they've had on the region. If we are to return to Unova in a Generation 9 game, I think there's a good possibility that we could see Paradox versions of these Pokemon. The story would go that Getsis, or the evil villain, would crave the power of Terapagos of Area Zero, seeking their truth, their ideal reality. And the grave mistake that they would make is to wish upon these Pokemon so they can harness the dragon Pokemon Reshiram or Zekrom for themselves. But their mistake is trying to harness them by force through artificial means. And their punishment is to awaken these Paradox Pokemon, Alabaster Flare and Obsidian Bolt. Ironically, neither of these Pokemon would be Dragon type. Alabaster Flare would be the Paradox Reshiram. It would possess the fire and ghost typing. It would rise like a phoenix. Obsidian Bolt would be the Paradox Zekrom. It would be electric and bug type, resembling a blue beetle. And while these Pokemon would be very powerful and serve as formidable boss battles, the pure heart of the trainer protagonist would awaken the original dragon to smite the evil villain. These designs are fierce, and while they're not exactly what we would expect, I think they're incredibly fitting for Paradox Pokemon. This is what Reshiram and Zekrom would look like in other dimensions. But there is the potential that we do see a purified Reshiram and Zekrom. I don't know if Game Freak will ever give us the original dragon, but I could see a world where we get Ancient Truths, the pure fire type Reshiram, and this is Iron Ideals, the pure electric type Zekrom. This beast is pure technology from another timeline, possibly from another dimension. If you're still watching, make sure you subscribe, and there's a link in the description to become a Patreon supporter. Love you guys. Arceus bless.